If anyone had told me, Margaret Reynolds, that I'd be here on a luxury cruise, sitting at an exclusive bar, contemplating something so scandalous, I would have laughed in their face. Me? Margaret, 68 years old, married for more than 4 decades? The thought would have been absurd. But life has a way of surprising you, especially when you're least prepared for it. Richard, my husband, had once been everything to me. A powerful, wealthy businessman, he had an energy that drew people to him, myself included. I fell for his charm when I was in my 20s, and for a long time I was happy to be by his side, living the life we had built together. But Richard wasn't the same man anymore. Time had changed him. His ambition had worn him down, and at 78, his age was starting to show. Over the last decade, our marriage had turned into a shadow of what it used to be. Richard had grown distant, consumed by his work, by his own struggles with aging. I had become invisible to him. He was no longer capable of the intimacy that had once been the foundation of our relationship. His touch, once electrifying, had faded into nothingness. The truth was, I had been lonely for years, but I had accepted it as part of growing old. That was, until this cruise. It was supposed to be our 40th wedding anniversary celebration. Richard had booked us a suite on one of the most luxurious cruise liners in the world, an extravagant floating palace that made stops at some of the most exotic and exclusive ports. But instead of a romantic rekindling of our relationship, Richard had proposed something that left me reeling, something I never thought I'd hear from the man I'd spent most of my life with. "I want you to spend time with someone else," he said, his voice calm, like he was making a business deal. "2 younger men, Felix and Alex. I've arranged everything." I stared at him, my wine glass halfway to my lips, frozen in disbelief. "You... what?" Richard didn't flinch. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "I know I can't give you what you need anymore, Margaret. I've been thinking about this for a while. You deserve to feel desired again, to feel wanted." My heart raced as his words sank in. I didn't know whether to be angry, hurt, or intrigued. Richard, my husband of 40 years, wanted me to be with 2 strangers, 2 young men he had arranged for me. Was this his idea of fixing the years of neglect? Or was it something else, a way for him to watch from the sidelines, a way for him to exert control over me in a situation where he could no longer physically participate? "You've arranged this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Who are these men?" "They work on the cruise," Richard explained. "They're part of the VIP entertainment team. Their job is to entertain the wealthiest clients on board. They know the arrangement." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and disorienting. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was horrified. The other part, the part I didn't want to acknowledge, was intrigued. When was the last time I had felt desirable? When was the last time I had felt a man's eyes linger on me, not out of obligation or familiarity, but out of genuine want? "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered, my mind racing. "I don't know if I want to do this." Richard reached across the table and took my hand in his touch light but steady. "You don't have to make a decision right now," he said. "But think about it. This is for you, Margaret. I want you to feel alive again." His words were gentle, but they cut deep. Feel alive again. Was that what I wanted? To feel alive? The rest of that evening was a blur. Richard's words echoed in my mind long after we returned to our suite. As I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't stop thinking about the offer he had made. Felix and Alex, 2 young men hired to make me feel desired again. Was this some sort of test? Was Richard trying to see how far I'd go, how desperate I was for the kind of affection he could no longer give? Part of me wanted to march down to the captain's office and demand to be let off the ship at the next port, but another part of me, a part I hadn't known existed, was curious. What would it be like to be touched again, to be seen as something more than just a wife or a woman past her prime? I tossed and turned, my mind unable to settle. When morning came, I was exhausted, but the thought of what Richard had suggested still lingered, gnawing at me. It wasn't until later that day, as we sat on the sun deck watching the endless ocean stretch out before us, that Richard brought it up again. "I spoke with Felix and Alex," he said casually, as though we were discussing dinner plans. "They're expecting to meet you tonight, in the VIP lounge." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Richard, I'm not sure I can do this." He looked at me, his eyes calm but insistent. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Margaret. But I think this could be good for you. For us." "For us?" I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. "You think me being with two strangers is going to be good for our marriage?" "I think it will help you feel like yourself again," Richard said softly. "You've been unhappy, Margaret. I see it. I know I haven't been the husband you deserve. This is my way of giving you something I can't give anymore." I didn't know what to say. The logic of his argument was twisted, but there was a strange sincerity in his eyes. He truly believed this was the solution to the emptiness that had grown between us, and maybe, in some strange way, he was right. That evening, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in our suite, studying my reflection. I had chosen a simple, elegant dress, something that flattered my figure without being too revealing. My hair, which I had long since stopped fussing over, was loosely curled, and for the first time in years I had put on makeup. I stared at myself, trying to see what Richard might have seen in me all those years ago. I was older now, yes. My skin wasn't as smooth, my body not as firm, but there was still something there, a flicker of the woman I used to be, a woman who had once been full of life, full of passion. Taking a deep breath, I left the suite and made my way to the VIP lounge, my heart pounding in my chest. The VIP lounge was more intimate than I expected. It was tucked away on one of the higher decks, accessible only to a select few passengers. The room was dimly lit, with plush chairs and low tables scattered around, giving it a private, almost secretive feel. Soft jazz music played in the background, the notes blending with the sound of the ocean outside. As I entered, I felt a wave of nerves wash over me. What was I doing here? This wasn't me. I was a 68-year-old woman, married for decades, not someone who entertained the idea of this, but then I saw them. Felix and Alex stood near the bar, deep in conversation. Felix, tall and dark-haired, had an air of quiet confidence about him. His posture was relaxed, but there was an intensity in his eyes as he glanced around the room. Alex, on the other hand, was more playful, with lighter hair and a boyish charm that made him seem younger than his 24 years. When they saw me, both men smiled, and for a moment my nerves faded. There was something disarming about the way they looked at me, like I was the only person in the room who mattered. "Mrs. Reynolds," Felix said, his voice smooth as he stepped forward, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you." "Margaret, please," I corrected, my voice steadier than I expected. "Margaret," Alex repeated, his smile widening as he extended his hand. "You look stunning." I felt a flush of warmth spread across my cheeks. It had been years since anyone had complimented me like that, and even though I knew it was part of their job, it still made my heart flutter. "Shall we sit?" Felix suggested, motioning toward a private booth in the corner of the lounge. We made our way to the booth, and as I sat down between them, I couldn't help but feel the weight of their attention on me. Felix and Alex weren't just making small talk. They were fully engaged, their eyes never leaving mine, as if I were the most fascinating person they had ever met. "How are you enjoying the cruise so far?" Alex asked, his voice light and conversational. "It's lovely," I replied, though the word felt inadequate. "The ship is beautiful." Felix nodded. "It is, but it's nothing compared to the company." His words sent a shiver through me. There was something about the way he said it, not overtly flirtatious, but filled with a quiet intensity that made my heart race. Over the course of the next hour, we talked about everything and nothing. Felix and Alex were charming, attentive, and easy to talk to. They made me feel at ease despite the underlying tension that hummed between us. But as the evening wore on, I couldn't ignore the fact that this wasn't just a casual conversation. There was something else here, something unspoken, and it made my pulse quicken. Richard had told me I didn't have to do anything I wasn't comfortable with, but as I sat between Felix and Alex, I felt a strange pull. Part of me wanted to get up, to leave, to put an end to this before it went any further. But another part of me, a part I hadn't known existed, wanted to see where this would go. I wasn't ready to admit it to myself, but the truth was, I had missed this. I had missed the feeling of being desired, of being seen, and Felix and Alex, these two young, attractive men, were offering me something I hadn't had in years. The evening stretched on, and as the conversation flowed, so did the drinks. I wasn't sure whether it was the wine or the intoxicating attention from Felix and Alex, but I began to feel a sense of warmth and comfort spread through me, dulling the edges of my anxiety. Their presence was reassuring, and yet, beneath the surface, there was a current of something far more dangerous: temptation. As the night deepened, the mood in the lounge shifted. The soft jazz seemed to grow slower, more sultry, and the air around us felt heavier. Felix leaned in closer, his voice low, as he asked me about my life, my passions, my dreams. I found myself opening up to him in a way that surprised me. We talked about everything: my love for art, the years I spent traveling with Richard before his health began to decline, the dreams I had abandoned somewhere along the way. Felix listened intently, his gaze never wavering, as if every word I said was precious. On my other side, Alex remained playful, his charm ever present as he teased me lightly about the formal dress I had chosen for the evening. "You know," he said with a grin, "I can tell there's a fun, wild side to you under all that elegance." I laughed, though his words sent a ripple of excitement through me. There was a part of me, long buried, that had once been carefree and wild, full of passion and spontaneity. But over the years, that part of me had been suffocated by responsibilities, by the demands of marriage, by Richard's distance. I had forgotten what it felt like to be the center of someone's attention, to feel like a woman rather than just a wife. Felix reached out and placed his hand lightly on my arm, his touch gentle but deliberate. "I think Alex is right," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's so much more to you than meets the eye." His words sent a shiver through me, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. The energy between us had shifted. What had started as light conversation was now charged with something much more intense, something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I could feel the heat of Felix's body beside me, the warmth of Alex's playful gaze on me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. But with that feeling came the weight of guilt. I glanced around the lounge, half expecting to see Richard standing there, watching me from a distance. But he wasn't. He was somewhere else on the ship, likely in our suite, waiting for me to return. The thought made my stomach twist with unease. How could he have arranged this? How could he sit by, knowing that his wife was being seduced by two younger men? Felix must have sensed my hesitation because he leaned in closer, his voice soft and reassuring. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for, Margaret. We're here for you, whatever you want." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. Did I want this? Was I really willing to step over that line, to give in to the desire that had been building inside me since the moment I had laid eyes on Felix and Alex? I had been starved for affection for so long, but this wasn't just about physical need. This was about being seen, truly seen for the first time in years. Alex stood up suddenly, extending his hand to me with a grin. "Come on," he said, his eyes sparkling. "Dance with me." I hesitated for a moment, glancing around the lounge, but the room had emptied out. It was late, and only a few other guests remained, all engrossed in their own conversations. Felix watched me with a quiet intensity, his hand still resting lightly on my arm, while Alex's playful invitation hung in the air between us. "I don't know," I said, though my body was already responding to the idea, my pulse quickening with the thought of being in Alex's arms. "You can't say no to a dance," Alex teased, his grin widening, "especially not on a beautiful night like this." There was something infectious about his energy, something that made it impossible to resist. Before I knew it, I was standing, my hand slipping into his as he led me to the center of the lounge. The music slowed to a soft, sultry rhythm, and Alex pulled me close, his hand resting on the small of my back as we began to move in time with the music. I hadn't danced in years, not like this, not with someone who looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Alex's touch was gentle but firm, his movements confident as he guided me across the floor. I felt my body relax into his, the tension that had been building inside me slowly melting away as the music wrapped around us like a warm embrace. "You're a natural," Alex whispered, his breath warm against my ear. "I knew you had a wild side." I laughed softly, the sound surprising me. I hadn't felt this light, this carefree in longer than I could remember, and as we danced, I felt something shift inside me. The guilt that had weighed so heavily on my chest began to lift, replaced by a feeling I hadn't expected: freedom. Felix watched us from the booth, his dark eyes following our every movement. There was no jealousy in his gaze, only admiration, as if he was waiting for the moment when it would be his turn to sweep me into his arms. The thought sent a thrill through me, and I realized that I wanted this. I wanted to feel desired, wanted to be touched, wanted to be seen as something more than just Richard's aging wife. As the song came to an end, Alex slowed our movements, his hand lingering on my back as he looked down at me, his eyes filled with warmth and something else, something deeper, more intimate. "You're incredible, Margaret," he said softly. "I hope you know that." My heart fluttered at his words, and before I could respond, Felix stood up, making his way over to us. "Mind if I cut in?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. Alex stepped back with a playful grin, releasing me as Felix took his place. The shift in energy was immediate. Felix's touch was more deliberate, more intense. He pulled me closer, his hand firm on my waist, as we began to move in time with the music once again. His body was solid against mine, and I could feel the strength in his arms as he guided me across the floor. "You're something special, Margaret," Felix whispered, his lips brushing against my ear. "I can see why Richard wanted us to meet you." His words sent a shiver through me, and I felt my heart race as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Richard had arranged this. He had set all of this in motion, knowing full well what might happen. But in that moment, with Felix's arms around me and Alex watching from the sidelines, I realized that this wasn't just about Richard anymore. This was about me. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of my marriage, in the shadow of Richard's success and ambition, that I had forgotten who I was. I had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, to be desired, to be free. And now here I was, on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, dancing with two young men who saw me as something more than just a wife or a woman past her prime. The music slowed to a stop, and Felix's hand lingered on my waist, his gaze intense as he looked down at me. "What do you want, Margaret?" he asked softly, his voice full of quiet intensity. It was a simple question, but it felt loaded with meaning. What did I want? Did I want to return to the suite and pretend this night had never happened? Or did I want to see where this could go, to give in to the temptation that had been building inside me all night? "I don't know," I whispered, my voice barely audible. Felix smiled gently, his hand moving to cup my cheek. "You don't have to decide right now," he said softly. "But when you're ready, we're here." Alex stepped forward, his playful grin returning as he wrapped an arm around my shoulder. "No pressure, Margaret. We're just here to make sure you have a good time." The tension between us was palpable, but there was no rush, no urgency. Felix and Alex were giving me the space to decide what I wanted, to choose whether or not I was ready to cross that line. And as I stood there, caught between them, I realized that I wasn't ready to walk away just yet. The hours slipped by in a haze of laughter, conversation, and stolen glances. Felix and Alex had an effortless way of making me feel at ease, as if this strange, forbidden situation was perfectly normal. I should have felt scandalized, ashamed even, but I didn't. Instead, I felt alive. We left the lounge together, walking along the deck as the warm sea breeze kissed my skin. The stars were scattered across the sky, their light reflecting off the dark waters below. It was the kind of night that made everything feel possible, the kind of night where you could leave behind the weight of your past and step into something new. As we reached the more private part of the deck, Felix slowed his pace, his hand brushing lightly against mine. "Would you like to see our suite?" he asked, his voice low and inviting. My heart skipped a beat. I knew what he was really asking. This was it, the moment when everything would change. I could feel the tension between us, the pull of desire that had been building all night. Felix and Alex were offering me a chance to step outside the confines of my marriage, to experience something new, something thrilling. And for the first time in years, I wanted to say yes. I don't know," I stammered, my heart racing. Alex stepped closer, his smile warm and reassuring. "You don't have to do anything you don't want to, Margaret. We're not here to pressure you." Felix nodded, his eyes soft as he looked at me. "We just want to spend time with you, to make sure you're enjoying yourself." Their words were gentle, but the weight of the decision pressed down on me. I could turn back now, go back to the suite, and tell Richard that nothing had happened. Or I could step into the unknown, let myself feel something I hadn't felt in years, desire. I looked between Felix and Alex, their young, eager faces full of promise, and in that moment I made my choice. "Okay," I whispered, "let's go." The hallway leading to their suite felt like it stretched on forever, each step making my heart pound harder in my chest. Felix walked beside me, his hand gently resting on the small of my back, guiding me forward. Alex moved ahead, his playful energy now subdued, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. There was no rush in their movements, no pressure in their presence, just a quiet understanding that this was a moment of transformation for me. When we finally reached the door to their suite, Felix opened it and stepped aside, allowing me to enter first. The room was as luxurious as the rest of the ship, with plush furnishings and soft lighting that created an intimate, almost dreamlike atmosphere. Large windows overlooked the ocean, the moon casting a silver glow across the water. It was beautiful, serene, everything the moment wasn't. The door clicked shut behind us, and the sound echoed in the quiet room. My heart raced as I stood there, my mind buzzing with conflicting thoughts. Should I really be here? Was this the moment I crossed a line I could never return from? But then I felt Alex's hand on mine, pulling me gently toward the couch. "Come on, Margaret," he said softly, his voice full of warmth. "Sit with us." I allowed him to lead me to the couch, where Felix had already settled, his eyes on me, watching every move I made. I could feel the intensity of his gaze, the quiet desire simmering just beneath the surface. It made my skin tingle, made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. Alex sat beside me, his arm casually draped across the back of the couch, his fingers brushing against my shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, though the truth was I wasn't sure if I was okay. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, excitement, guilt, desire, all swirling together in a chaotic storm that made it hard to think clearly. But amidst the chaos, there was a growing sense of something else: liberation. For so long, I had been trapped in a marriage that had left me feeling invisible, unimportant, unloved. Richard had been the center of my world, but I had become little more than a fixture in his life, something he no longer truly saw. But here, with Felix and Alex, I was the focus of their attention. They were seeing me, not just as Richard's wife, not just as a woman past her prime, but as me. And that was intoxicating. Felix reached out, his hand resting on my knee, his touch light but deliberate. "You're safe with us," he said softly, his voice full of quiet intensity. "You don't have to be afraid." I wasn't sure if it was fear that I was feeling. It was something deeper, something more primal. But his words settled something inside me, made it easier to breathe. I looked at him, at the way his dark eyes held mine, with such sincerity, and for the first time that night I felt a flicker of calm. Alex leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear as he whispered, "You deserve this, Margaret. You deserve to feel wanted." His words sent a shiver down my spine, and I felt the last of my hesitation slip away. For so long, I had denied myself this. Denied myself the right to feel desire, to feel pleasure, to feel alive, but I couldn't deny it any longer. I wanted this. I needed this. Slowly, I turned to face Alex, my heart pounding in my chest. His gaze met mine, filled with warmth and something more, something that made my breath catch. For a moment neither of us spoke, the air between us charged with anticipation. Alex's hand slid from the back of the couch to my shoulder, his touch light but full of promise. I wasn't used to this kind of attention, this feeling of being desired so openly, without hesitation. The years had dulled my sense of being wanted, but now, as Alex leaned in closer, I felt something stir deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like a lifetime. His lips hovered near mine, and for a second, I hesitated. My mind flashed to Richard, his words, his proposition, the cold distance that had grown between us over the years. This wasn't just about me and these two men. This was about my marriage, about the life I had lived and the choices I had made. Was this the moment I truly stepped away from it all? But then Alex's lips brushed against mine, soft at first, testing, and in that moment I knew I wasn't stepping away from anything. I was stepping into something, something new, something for me. The kiss deepened, and I felt Alex's hand slip to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. His kiss was gentle, not rushed, but filled with a hunger that sent shivers through me. My body responded instinctively, leaning into him, wanting more. I had been starved for this, for affection, for intimacy, for the feeling of being touched and desired. As Alex's lips explored mine, Felix moved closer, his presence a steady, comforting force beside me. His hand found mine, and he lifted it to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to my fingers. The contrast between the two men was striking, Alex playful and eager, and Felix more deliberate, more intense. It was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. For the first time in years, I felt free. Alex broke the kiss, his eyes dark with desire as he pulled back slightly, his breath warm against my skin. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice husky. "I hope you know that." My heart fluttered at his words, and I turned to look at Felix, who was watching me with a quiet intensity. He hadn't spoken much, but his eyes said everything. He wanted me, too. The thought sent a surge of excitement through me, and before I could second-guess myself, I reached out to him, my hand resting on his chest. Felix leaned in, his lips brushing against my cheek before finding my neck, his breath hot against my skin. His kiss was different, slower, more deliberate, as though he was savoring every moment. I closed my eyes, letting myself sink into the sensation, the feeling of being desired by two men who made me feel like I was the center of the universe. I could feel the weight of their attention, the heat of their bodies so close to mine, and for the first time in years, I let go. I let go of the guilt, the hesitation, the fear. I let myself be in the moment to feel what I had been denying myself for so long. Alex's hand slid up my thigh, his touch sending sparks of electricity through me. Felix's lips moved lower, trailing kisses down my neck and across my collarbone. My pulse quickened, my breath coming in shallow gasps as their touches overwhelmed me. It was too much, and yet not enough. "Margaret," Felix whispered against my skin, his voice low and full of need. "Do you want this?" I opened my eyes, looking at him, at Alex, at the two men who had brought me to this moment. The question was simple, but the answer was complicated. I wanted this. God, how I wanted this, but I also knew that this moment would change everything. There was no going back from this, but maybe that was okay. "I want this," I whispered, my voice shaking with emotion. "I want this." Felix's eyes darkened, and he leaned in, capturing my lips in a kiss that was both tender and demanding. At the same time, Alex's hands continued their exploration, his touch sending waves of pleasure through me. My body responded instinctively, arching toward them, craving more. For so long I had been denied this, denied the right to feel wanted, to feel alive. But now, in the arms of these two young men, I felt more alive than I had in years. They made me feel beautiful, desirable, powerful, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe it. The soft light of dawn filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow across the room. I stirred, slowly waking from the deep sleep that had claimed me sometime in the early hours of the morning. My body felt different, sore in a pleasant way, as if I had been reminded of muscles I hadn't used in years. For a brief moment I forgot where I was, but as I blinked my eyes open and took in the luxurious surroundings, the events of the previous night came rushing back. The kisses, the touches, the way Felix and Alex had made me feel like the most important woman in the world. I rolled over, half expecting to see them beside me, but the bed was empty. A sense of disorientation washed over me as I sat up, pulling the sheets around me. The room was quiet, save for the faint hum of the ship's engines in the background. The events of the night before felt almost surreal, like a dream I hadn't quite woken up from. But it wasn't a dream. It had happened. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to make sense of the jumble of emotions swirling inside me. I had crossed a line, stepped into territory I had never imagined for myself. And yet, I didn't feel the crushing guilt I had expected. I didn't feel shame. Instead, I felt something else, something lighter. Liberation. Felix and Alex had been kind, attentive, and in their own way, they had given me a gift. They had made me feel wanted again, had reminded me that I was more than just a wife, more than just a woman trapped in a marriage that had grown cold. I slipped out of bed, wrapping the sheet around me as I padded across the room. The door to the balcony was slightly ajar, and I could hear the soft sound of the ocean outside. I hesitated for a moment before stepping out onto the balcony, the cool morning air brushing against my skin. There they were, Felix and Alex, leaning against the railing, deep in conversation. They hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I stood there, watching them. They looked so young, so full of life, and I couldn't help but smile at the memory of the night we had shared. Felix turned first, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. "Good morning," he said softly, his voice carrying the warmth of someone who had shared something intimate with me. Alex grinned, his usual playful energy returning as he straightened up and walked over to me. "You look like you slept well," I laughed softly, pulling the sheet tighter around me. "I think I did." Felix walked over to join us, his gaze soft as he reached out to touch my hand. "We didn't want to wake you. You seemed at peace." I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. It was true. I had been at peace for the first time in what felt like forever. But now that the morning had arrived, reality was creeping back in, and with it came questions I wasn't sure I was ready to face. What would happen next? What would I say to Richard? Could I go back to him after this, after feeling what I had felt last night? "I don't know what comes next," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Felix squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to figure it all out right now." Alex nodded in agreement. "This was about you, Margaret. Last night was for you. Don't let anything or anyone take that away." Their words were reassuring, but the truth was, I didn't know how to move forward from here. I had stepped into something forbidden, something that had changed me in ways I was only beginning to understand, but for now I wasn't ready to face those questions. Not yet. "Thank you," I said softly, looking between them. "For everything." Felix smiled, his eyes filled with warmth. "We're glad we could give you what you needed." Alex's grin widened. "And who knows? The cruise isn't over yet." I returned to my suite later that morning, my mind still spinning from the night before. Richard was waiting for me, sitting at the small table by the window, a cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't look surprised to see me walk in. If anything, he seemed expectant. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive, until finally Richard broke it. "How was it?" he asked, his voice calm but tinged with something I couldn't quite place. I froze, unsure how to respond. How was it? How could I possibly explain what had happened, what I had felt? The guilt I had expected to feel was absent, replaced by a strange sense of peace. I could still feel the warmth of Felix and Alex's touch lingering on my skin, the weight of their attention filling the empty spaces inside me. But how could I admit that to Richard? How could I explain that what he had arranged had shifted something deep within me? "Richard," I began, my voice trembling as I walked farther into the room, "why did you do this?" He sipped his coffee, his gaze steady as he watched me. "Because I knew I couldn't give you what you needed anymore." His words were calm, devoid of emotion, as though he had accepted the reality of his limitations long ago. But there was something hollow about the way he said it, something that made me feel uneasy. It wasn't just about his physical inability to satisfy me. There was more to it than that. something darker, something I hadn't fully understood until this moment. "I thought it was what you wanted," he continued, his voice growing quieter. "I thought seeing you happy, feeling alive again, would make things better." I stood there staring at him, trying to make sense of what he was saying. Had this really been about me? Or was it about him? Was this some twisted way for him to control me, to manage his own guilt over what had become of our marriage? I could feel my emotions bubbling up inside me, anger, confusion, resentment. But there was something else, too, something softer. A flicker of sympathy for the man sitting in front of me, the man who had once been everything to me, but had now become a stranger. "You thought this would fix us?" I asked, my voice shaking. "That having me sleep with two strangers would somehow bring us closer?" Richard's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, maybe. Or was it relief that I had finally confronted him? "I didn't know what else to do," he admitted, setting his cup down with a soft clink. "We've been drifting apart for years, Margaret. I've seen it. You've felt it. This was my way of letting you have what I couldn't give you anymore." I crossed my arms over my chest, feeling exposed in a way I hadn't expected. "And what about you?" I asked, my voice rising. "What did you get out of this, Richard? Did you enjoy knowing I was with them? Did it make you feel better about yourself, about the fact that you've abandoned me for so long?" His face tightened, the calm exterior cracking for the first time since this conversation had started. "It wasn't like that," he said defensively. "I thought it would help." "Help who?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Help me, or help you feel less guilty about what our marriage has become?" The words spilled out before I could stop them, and for a moment the silence in the room was suffocating. Richard looked at me, his eyes dark with something I hadn't seen in him for years, vulnerability, and in that moment I realized that he wasn't just trying to fix me, he was trying to fix himself. He was trying to salvage whatever was left of the life we had built together, even if it meant pushing me into the arms of other men. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't know how else to reach you." His admission hung in the air between us, and for the first time in years I saw the man I had fallen in love with all those years ago, the man who had once been so full of life and energy, but who had now been worn down by time and distance. He wasn't the villain I had painted him as in my mind. He was just a man, desperate to hold on to something that had been slipping away for far too long. But that didn't change the fact that he had made a choice that had brought me to this moment, standing on the edge of something I wasn't sure I could come back from. "I don't know if this can be fixed, Richard," I said quietly, my voice heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. "I don't know if we can be fixed." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up from the table and walked over to the window, staring out at the endless expanse of ocean. "I never wanted to lose you," he said after a long pause. "But maybe I already have." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing tighter. Maybe we lost each other a long time ago. The silence that followed was filled with a kind of sadness that I hadn't expected. We had both made mistakes, both let our marriage wither away over the years. And now, standing in the aftermath of everything that had happened, I realized that maybe there was no going back. Maybe this was the moment when I had to finally let go. Richard turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "So, what now?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I can't go back to the way things were." He nodded slowly, as if he had expected that answer. "And Felix and Alex?" he asked, his voice quiet. "What do they mean to you now?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment I didn't know how to respond. What did they mean to me? They had been a catalyst for something inside me, a way for me to rediscover a part of myself that I had lost. But beyond that, they were just two young men, kind, attentive, but ultimately strangers. "They helped me see what I've been missing," I said finally. "But they're not the answer, Richard. I need more than that. I need more than what we've become." His shoulders slumped slightly, as though he had been carrying the weight of this realization for years. "I understand," he said softly, his voice tinged with resignation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched on, and I realized that this was the end, perhaps not of our marriage in a legal sense, but the end of whatever connection we had once shared. We had both changed too much, grown too distant, and now there was no way to bridge that gap. "I think we need time apart," I said gently, though the words felt like a blade cutting through me. Richard didn't argue. He didn't plead for me to stay. He simply nodded, accepting the truth of what I had said. "Take all the time you need." I packed my things slowly, taking care to fold each item of clothing with precision, as though that simple act would help me make sense of the emotions swirling inside me. The cruise had a few more days left, but I knew I couldn't stay in the suite with Richard. Not after everything that had happened. I needed space. I needed time to figure out what I wanted, who I was, now that the life I had known for so long was unraveling. As I zipped up my suitcase, there was a knock at the door. For a moment I thought it might be Richard, but when I opened it I found Felix and Alex standing there, their expressions a mix of concern and curiosity. "Hey," Alex said, his usual playful energy subdued. "We heard you were leaving the suite." I nodded, stepping aside to let them in. "I need some time to think," I said quietly. "I'm not sure where things go from here." Felix's gaze was steady, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't sure I had. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Last night?" I shook my head. "Number, I don't regret it, but it's complicated." Alex stepped closer, his hand resting on my arm. "You don't have to explain, Margaret. We get it. We just wanted to make sure you're okay." I smiled, grateful for their kindness. "I am. I just need to figure out what's next." Felix nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Whatever happens, we're glad we could be there for you. And if you ever want to dance again," Alex added with a wink, "you know where to find us." Their light-heartedness made me laugh, and for a moment the weight on my chest lifted. Felix and Alex had been more than just a fleeting experience. They had reminded me of who I was, of what I deserved. But now it was time for me to figure out the rest on my own. I moved into a different cabin for the remainder of the cruise, a small but comfortable room that offered me the solitude I needed. The days passed in a blur of quiet reflection, long walks on the deck, and moments of introspection as I stared out at the endless ocean. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Richard. I wasn't thinking about the woman I had been, the wife I had become, or the life I had lived in his shadow. Instead, I was thinking about me, about the woman I had rediscovered, the woman who still had so much life left to live. When the cruise finally docked, I left the ship with a sense of clarity. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer the same woman who had boarded that ship with Richard. I was stronger now, freer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. Richard and I would have to face the reality of our marriage eventually. But for now, I was content to take things one step at a time. I had spent so many years living for someone else. Now it was time to live for me. They say that life changes after a certain age. that at some point the fire in your heart quiets down, and what's left are embers flickering faintly. You resign yourself to the rhythm of solitude, believing the most exciting parts of your life are behind you. I believed that too. My name is Martha Harris, and I am 65 years old. I've spent the last 5 years as a widow, living in a grand, aging estate that feels as empty as my heart has for years. There's a kind of peace in the quiet, but also a loneliness that wraps itself around you like a heavy cloak, pulling you deeper into the stillness. But all of that changed when Samuel came into my life. He was 25, young, passionate, and full of life in ways that reminded me of a version of myself I had long forgotten. I never intended to fall for him. In fact, I never thought I could still feel what I ended up feeling. This isn't a story about youthful passion, nor is it about love in the traditional sense. It's about the unexpected, the disruptive force of desire that shows up when you think you're beyond it. I can't explain why it happened, or even if it should have, but I know this Samuel made me feel alive again in ways I never imagined possible. My estate, nestled at the edge of a small coastal town, has been in disrepair for years. It is a house built on memories of my husband Charles, who passed away 5 years ago, and the life we once shared. The walls echo with the sound of the past, a past I cling to because it's all I've had for so long. Since Charles' death, my life has been defined by routine. I wake up early, brew coffee, and sit by the window watching the ocean roll in and out, as if waiting for something to change. But nothing ever does. I tried to keep busy. I gardened, volunteered at the library, and even took up knitting at one point, but none of it filled the void. My career as a journalist had been long over by the time Charles passed, and now I felt like a relic, useless, forgotten. The woman who had once traveled the world interviewing dignitaries and exploring foreign lands was reduced to someone who barely left her house. Even my body betrayed me. The aches in my joints reminded me daily of how far I'd fallen from my prime. I still see people from time to time. Alice, my neighbor and closest friend, would come over for tea on Sundays, but even those visits felt hollow. She had her own life, her own family, and I couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in. It was as if I had become a ghost in my own life, drifting through the days without a clear purpose. The house, once vibrant and full of life, was beginning to show its age, too. The roof leaked, the foundation creaked, and the wood around the windows had begun to rot. It was a fitting metaphor for how I felt inside, weathered and crumbling, but too tired to do anything about it. That is until the day the cracks in the old estate's walls became too big to ignore. The house needed repairs, and so did I, though I didn't realize it at the time. I remember the first day Samuel came to the house as clearly as if it were yesterday. It was a warm day in late spring, and I had called a local construction company to assess the damage. When the truck pulled up, I expected to see some grizzled old contractor, but instead, out stepped Samuel, young, strong, and full of energy. He wore a faded t-shirt and jeans, his hair disheveled from the wind, and his smile was easy, as if the world hadn't yet weighed him down. I felt an immediate discomfort in his presence, not because of anything he did, but because I wasn't used to being around someone so young. He introduced himself with a confidence that both surprised and intrigued me. "Mrs. Harris, I'm Samuel. I'll be working on the house for the next few weeks." I shook his hand, my fingers brushing against the calluses of his palm. He felt solid, grounded, and it made me acutely aware of how fragile I had become. At that moment, I wasn't thinking of anything beyond the fact that he would be fixing the house, but something in me shifted. As the days passed, Samuel worked diligently, and I often found myself lingering around the construction sites. At first, it was purely curiosity. I had nothing better to do, after all. But soon I realized I was drawn to his presence, to the vitality he exuded. His laughter filled the quiet house, and his music — he would sometimes play guitar during breaks — floated through the halls like a forgotten melody. We talked often during his breaks. He asked me about my life, my travels as a journalist, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone in years. He was fascinated by my stories, genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was the first time in a long time that I felt truly seen. Samuel told me about his own life, how he was working construction to save up for music school, how he wanted to become a professional guitarist. There was a fire in him, a hunger for life that I had once had but lost somewhere along the way. And as I listened to him talk about his dreams, I felt something stirring inside me. I should have known then that I was playing with fire, but I told myself it was harmless. After all, I was a widow, old enough to be his mother. What could possibly happen? Days turned into weeks, and Samuel's presence in the house became something I looked forward to more than I cared to admit. I began to notice small things, how his muscles flexed when he lifted heavy beams, how his eyes sparkled when he smiled, and how he seemed to linger just a little longer than necessary when we talked. The first real spark of desire hit me one afternoon when I brought him a glass of water. It was a hot day, and the sun was beating down mercilessly. I watched as Samuel downed the glass in one long gulp, the sweat dripping down his neck. As he handed the glass back to me, his fingers brushed mine. It was such a small, innocent touch, but it sent a jolt through me that I wasn't prepared for. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about him. My mind wandered to places it hadn't gone in years. I imagined what it would feel like to be touched again, to be held. But then the guilt crept in. How could I be thinking such things about someone so much younger? It was absurd, shameful, but the thoughts didn't go away. Every time I saw him, they grew stronger. I started to notice how I would linger in front of the mirror before he arrived, adjusting my clothes, making sure my hair was neat. It was foolish, but I couldn't help myself. One afternoon, as we were walking around the estate, I tripped on an uneven stone and stumbled into him. His hands caught me before I could fall, steadying me. We stood there for a moment, too close, his hands gripping my arms. My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel the heat radiating off his body. "I've got you," he said softly, his voice low. I looked up at him, and in that moment something passed between us. It was brief, just a flicker of recognition, but it was enough. I pulled away quickly, mumbling my thanks, but the damage was done. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. The first kiss happened late one evening. Samuel had stayed behind after work to help me move some furniture in the attic. We were both tired, the light in the attic dim and the air thick with dust. After we finished, we sat down on an old bench, catching our breath. We talked for a while, the conversation flowing easily as it always did. But then something changed. The silence between us stretched out, and the air grew heavy with unspoken words. I could feel him watching me, his gaze lingering on my face, and when I looked up, our eyes locked. I don't know who moved first. All I remember is the sensation of his lips against mine, gentle, hesitant, but full of intent. I should have pulled away, should have stopped it right then and there, but I didn't. Instead, I kissed him back, letting myself get lost in the moment. When we finally pulled apart, I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. "Martha, I whispered, placing a hand on his chest. "Just don't. We didn't speak of it after that, but the kiss lingered in the air between us, a secret we both carried. I was filled with a mix of exhilaration and shame. The guilt gnawed at me, but the desire was stronger. I felt alive again in ways I hadn't in years. Over the next few weeks, our encounters became more frequent. We never spoke about what was happening between us, but the physical tension was undeniable. When we were alone, he would kiss me, his touch growing bolder with each passing day. We would find secluded corners of the house to steal moments together, his hands exploring my body with a tenderness that made me forget everything else. But it wasn't just physical. Samuel had awakened something deeper in me, a yearning for connection, for passion, for life. He made me feel like a woman again, not just a widow stuck in the past. I found myself looking forward to his touch, to the way he made me feel desired. Yet with every stolen moment the guilt grew. I thought of Charles often, of the life we had built together, and I wondered what he would think if he knew. But I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. The affair with Samuel was exhilarating, but it came at a cost. The guilt I felt over Charles was only part of it. There was also the fear of being discovered, the knowledge that what I was doing was dangerous, not just for me, but for Samuel too. Alice, my neighbor, started to notice the changes in me. She mentioned one afternoon during tea how lively I seemed lately, how there was a new energy about me. She was curious, of course, and I could see the questions forming in her mind. I brushed her off, telling her I had just been focusing on the house and enjoying the renovations, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She didn't know, of course, but she suspected something, and that suspicion made me paranoid. I began to be more careful around Samuel, making sure we were never seen together outside of the house. But it wasn't just Alice. The guilt was weighing on me in ways I hadn't anticipated. Samuel, on the other hand, seemed to be falling deeper into the affair. He would linger longer after work, wanting to spend more time with me, to talk, to touch. He was young, full of passion, and I could tell he was starting to expect more from me than I was ready to give. One evening, after a particularly intense moment between us, he asked me if I could ever see a future with him. The question caught me off guard, and I didn't know how to respond. A future? The thought was absurd. I was 65 and he was 25. What future could we possibly have? But the look in his eyes told me he was serious. He wanted something more from me, something I wasn't sure I could give. After Samuel's question, things between us grew tense. I could feel the weight of his expectations pressing down on me, and it scared me. I had never intended for the affair to become anything more than a fleeting moment of passion, a way to feel alive again. But Samuel wanted more, and I didn't know how to give it to him. I tried to distance myself from him. I started avoiding him when he came to the house, making excuses for why I couldn't spend time with him, but it was harder than I thought. Every time I saw him, the desire came rushing back, and I couldn't help but be drawn to him. It was a constant push and pull, wanting him but knowing I couldn't have him, needing him but knowing it would never last. I was living a double life, caught between the woman I had been for so many years and the woman I had become with Samuel. One day Alice came over unexpectedly while Samuel was at the house. I had to scramble to keep her from seeing him, and the fear of being caught sent my heart racing. It was a close call, too close, and it made me realize just how dangerous the situation had become. The breaking point came after weeks of tension. Samuel had grown frustrated with my distance, and one evening, after another round of excuses from me, he confronted me. He wanted to know what we were doing, what I wanted from him. He was falling in love with me, he said, and he needed to know if I felt the same. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Love? How could I love him? I cared for him, yes, but love. That was impossible. I couldn't give him what he wanted, and the realization crushed me. I tried to explain it to him, tried to make him understand that I was too old, too broken for him. But he wouldn't listen. He didn't care about my age, he said. He didn't care about any of it. He just wanted me. But I knew it couldn't last. The guilt, the shame, the fear, it was all too much. So with a heavy heart, I told him we had to end it. There was no future for us, and the sooner we accepted that, the better. Samuel was devastated. He begged me to reconsider, but I stood firm. It was over. It had to be. After Samuel left, I was consumed by a profound sense of loss. The house felt emptier than ever, and the silence was deafening. I had let go of the one thing that had made me feel alive again, and now I was left with nothing but memories. I spent the next few months reflecting on my life, my choices, and the affair with Samuel. I thought about Charles, about the life we had built together, and the love we had shared. It was a different kind of love than what I had felt with Samuel, deeper, more stable, but it was love all the same. One day I received a letter from Samuel. He thanked me for everything, for helping him rediscover his passion for life, and for showing him a kind of love he hadn't known before. He told me he was moving away to pursue his dream of becoming a musician, and he hoped I could find peace in my own life. His words stirred something in me, and I realized that it was time to let go of the past. I sold the estate, moving to a smaller, more manageable home, and began teaching piano again. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life, not as the woman who had an affair, but as someone who had learned to live again.